guys, let's talk about pink sapphires and padparadschas. So we just got this new inventory in, and I always think it's like a really good opportunity to just show you concrete examples, different colors, the ranges, the price points, the things that me as a buyer I'm looking out for when I purchase for my clients. So as a first-time buyer, I find it a little bit easier to get a full kind of grasp as to what to expect. So the first thing I like to start with for sapphires is really the color, because color is going to be the most important thing. It's a little bit different than when you're buying a diamond. We really are putting an emphasis on the color because that's really the beauty of the gemstone. Sapphires come in a wide range of colors. So these guys are pinks and padparadsschas. I put them together because, you know, padparadsschas are obviously slightly pink as well. I think we'll start with more of the pink sapphires. Pink sapphires are sapphires that I absolutely love. Why? Because you have very, very pale, very feminine colors like this, all the way down to very saturated, almost raspberry pinks like this. There's really a sapphire for everybody, and they always come in different hues. For example, even these two are pink, but this one even has like more of a purple undertone. So they're really unique and honestly very, very feminine stones. If you're looking for like a pink diamond alternative, these are really good options. Next, we're going into the padparadsschas. And so padparadsschas are really a specialty stone. They are sapphires that either have a base color of orange with a hint of pink, or a pink sapphire with a hint of orange in it. And you're actually going to see it on the certificate. It will always indicate orange with pink or pink with orange. It needs to have the two to be a padparadscha. For example, these two look very similar, except this is a peach sapphire, right? So it has no pink undertone versus this one has a very slight pinkish look. It's very minute, but because it has that secondary color in it, it almost just looks a little bit more fleshy. The way you turn it is going to come out in its pleochrysm as well, so you're going to start to see different colors when you're rotating it, versus this will be a more consistent color. Of course, they will be fetching different price points that we're going to touch on in a minute, but that's really the base of a padparadscha. And again, just like any other color sapphires, these guys are very pale. However, we do find them in very, very saturated colors like you're going to see on the screen. And again, this is really a personal preference. The interesting thing for pinks and pads that you'll really notice is that for other colors of sapphires, even like emeralds, rubies, the more saturated the gemstone is, generally the higher the quality is, the more desired they are, the higher the price point, right? This will actually shift for this color range. Why? Because the paler options are generally the most desired, which is why the demand has basically driven the price. And it goes for the same for the pinks. The hot pinks, like that very bright, vivid Barbie pink, those would technically be of higher quality, but because most people don't necessarily like that color range, these are really what we're going to be finding. And of course, if we're talking about color, we need to talk about heat treatments. So what's really interesting is that a lot of the times, you know, when we're buying blue sapphires, greens, a lot of them are more saturated stones, which is why a lot of them are heat treated. But these guys are not, which is really interesting. Like I had a client recently asked, I'm looking for a paler stone, but I don't want it to be heat treated. And she was actually under the impression that it was going to be harder to find, but it's actually the opposite. Because these colors are very pale, they are more commonly found just naturally as is. So I don't think any of these are heat treated except this one and maybe this one. And also what's really cool is that these are actually really eye clean. Like we hold very high quality stones, and the fact that they have not been heated is not only just for like the color's sake, but heat treatments will actually correct the imperfections. So these are really nice because they have a very high clarity. They are eye clean, so these are just real beauties. And I just wanted to point out one last little tip when we're talking about color, because padparadsschas, like for example, these guys are a little bit on the paler side. As soon as you start to go over, let's say the 2.5 into the 3 carat range, a slight difference in saturation can be tens and 20s and $30,000 of difference. And so if you are looking for a padparadscha and you don't want to necessarily hit another bracket, buying a slightly paler stone and then adding a different color of prongs can actually help bring back a little bit of saturation. For example, this stone, if I wanted to add a little bit more orange to it, I would add yellow gold prongs. If I wanted to add a little bit more pink into the stone, I would put rose gold prongs and a rose gold basket under the stone to bring that color out. So that's a little trick. Right before we get into prices, we're going to talk about cuts. because sapphires will often be a little bit cut differently than diamonds. So diamonds will have, the traditional brilliant cut that we've been seeing for the last like 2 decades. Sapphires will often have step cut mixed with a brilliant cut, so they may look slightly different. The reason why we do this is because sapphires will reflect a little bit differently than a diamond, so we will modify the cut to basically give it its best brilliance, and so that's why it often looks just ever so slightly a little bit different by eye. These ones are all very nicely cut. I would say where you're going to start to really see it is when you're going to be looking at padparachas. So padparachas, especially like 2.5, 3 carats and up, what ends up happening is that the raw material is so valuable. Average, when you're cutting a stone, you're losing about 40% of the rough. That being said, a lot of the times the gem cutters will try to lose as little amount of weight to keep the value, but that's why we have like these little bit of like wonky stones. That's what ends up happening, especially like for like ovals. Sometimes they'll have like bigger windows, they'll be slightly off. In my opinion, I think that overall, if the stone is still beautiful, I would overlook it. Because at the end of the day, you're not buying a padparadscha for, its cut or clarity, you're buying it for its color, right? So if the stone overall is beautiful, in my opinion, it can be overlooked, because what ends up happening otherwise is that you would have to have it recut. And if it's a very minute, imbalance, personally, I don't think it's worth losing that carat weight and losing that value. All right, so let's get into the prices. Let's start with the pink sapphires. We'll make our way into the pads. This bad boy is a 2.47. It does come with a report. It is more of like a darker raspberry red, and it goes for about 11,000. Just to show you, we are currently making a tourmaline ring for a client. It's actually very similar in color. And this one is a 2.44 carat, and it goes for about 1,700 Canadian. So if you are looking for these saturations, there are actually gemstones that come in that range as well. Of course, it won't have the same brilliance and the same luster as the sapphire, but I thought it was kind of cool to mention. This is definitely one of my favorites. It's a 2.5 carat pink sapphire, no heat, and it goes for about 8,000. This one I absolutely love. It has such a feminine, like bubblegum look, and I think it's really nice for a pendant. So this is my fave. And then we also go more into like the pinks, but again, there's like so many different saturations. So this one leans almost a little bit more of a purple undertone, slightly more saturated. It is a 1.3 carat, and it goes for about 2,600. And like that's what I'm talking about. The cut is a little bit different. You see, so this one is more of a step cut, and it's a little bit shorter. This one has a little bit more of an elegant length, I find, but of course, it's personal preference. This is where we're going to start getting into the padparadscha. So I really wanted to show you the comparison. So this bad boy is the pink sapphire. This one looks very similar in color in the sense that it's a light baby pink, but this is a padparadscha, and you're going to see a slight undertone of orange. And that little undertone of orange that's going to really come out when you start like moving it. This is a 1.59 carat, so almost a carat under, and it's going for about 11,500. So that's why there is quite a bit of a jump. There is no heat on this one as well, but you can see that it has just like a little bit more warmth, and there's just something about padparachas. It's almost like kind of like a neon effect. Like they have like a slight undertone of a glow when you compare the two. And so this one is beautiful, but when you put it next to it, it almost looks slightly flat. Just a little bit. So that's really the one thing that I would say. And then again, this one is a peach sapphire, so I still consider it kind of in the pink range, versus this one is a padparadscha on the peach side, but there's a significant price difference, right? So both of them are no heat. The padparadscha is a 2 carat, and it goes for almost 21,000, versus this is a 2.54 carat, so a little bit bigger, but it goes for about 15,000. There is quite a bit of a jump for a smaller carat weight. And again, it's the same thing with like the pink. It's like a little je ne sais quoi. It's like a little bit of like a neon glow to it. This one is really almost like a flat peach. But then when you put it next to the padparadscha, there is like that little pink kind of saturation to it that it's really peculiar when you look at it. It is noticeable. So it's a very nice stone. But again, like if you are looking for this color range, like this is actually a very beautiful stone, and it's perfect. It's just you're going to be under in a different bracket. This one again is as well peach undertone with a slight pink hue. This one is a 2.15 carat, and again it's going for 22,000, and it comes with a report. All of these stones are going to have reports. The majority of our stones are coming from Madagascar. It's just where our suppliers are. And then this one is leaning a little bit more pink as well. So this is a 2 carat, and it's going for 20,500. No heat as well. That's the peculiar thing about padparadscha is I mentioned it earlier, but when you are going to be going for this color range, a lot of them are unheated. When you start to go into the more saturated, most of them tend to be heated, and so the prices will usually be lower. However, if you are going for a more saturated stone with no heat, I recently looked for a client and this was like I believe this was a 3.5 carat and it was retailing for about 90,000. It really does jump quite a bit. Of course, this was a phenomenal stone. It's one of the most beautiful stones that I've ever had the pleasure of looking at, may I say. But that's the kind of price points that we're talking about because they are so rare. And so that's why I always recommend just like reaching out to us and being like, hey, this is the color I'm looking for. I prefer a peachy with a pink, or a pink with a pink with an orange undertone. This is the shapes that I like, and your price point will be able to recommend you realistic what it is that we can find. If you do like any of these, they are going to be on the website, so you can shop, take your time, have a look at them. My name is Flux. I've been a custom jewelry designer for a decade now, and I'd love to work with you. Bye.